When Rod originally asked me to do this, I thought, well, this should be easy. It's what I've been doing for 20, almost 30 plus years. And then the truth is I sat down to do this presentation and realized that this change wasn't anything that I drove for. It wasn't my original goal. It wasn't what I set out to do when I went to work for Blackhawk Equipment 29 years ago. It just seemed to happen as a progression of many multiple decisions that we made as a company throughout the years. Prior to my tenure with Blackhawk Equipment, I was in the U.S. Navy, and my job was very much a jack of all trades. Seemed an easy progression to keep going that direction. A little bit of history on myself and Blackhawk Equipment. We began auditing back in 2002. There's a large upfront investment back then with auditing to get all the tools that we thought we needed at the time to do auditing, specifically focusing on compressed air only. Simple positive displacement, small systems. Received my Airmaster qualification in 2006. I was one of the first group to go through the Airmaster curriculum. And again, we started with just compressed air audits only. Very simple positive displacement systems, maybe 2 or 3 machines, nothing big. We did have, however, extremely large investment in the equipment. So then, as we started doing more audits and getting into more plants, we realized that customers wanted more information. We kept getting questions. Can you audit this? Can you define the way this machine operates? And frankly, the simple, small compressed air auditing equipment that we had at the time just wasn't sufficient. We had to keep adding to our system. We had to keep learning. Basically, this whole trip and history has been on learning. That's the way to constantly add value that your customers can take benefit from, basically. So we were asked, can you now audit this centrifugal compressor? Can you audit vacuum systems? Can you audit 5,000 volt systems? Can you give us kilowatts? And as most of you know, to do that, more investment. Again, much more investment. Flow meters, medium voltage kilowatt transmitters, lots more training. I became a centrifugal technician to be able to better understand the compressors, to be able to understand the systems, and more importantly, understand the controls and how these systems worked. So we added all that equipment, and it just helped us along with the customers. So we were now doing positive displacement systems from the smallest 3 and 5 horsepower reciprocating compressors up to multi-stage, multi-thousand horsepower compressors and systems. The basic system stayed the same. It just, we got bigger and added more equipment. Then we began to get even further questions. Does it make sense to measure vacuum? Is there an optimization possibility with a vacuum system? You start with compressed air in most plants, and it is the low-hanging fruit, the easy to go after, easy to make recommendations that have very large impact and very large incentives and very large paybacks. Vacuum, I don't know. Back then, it wasn't really popular to audit vacuum systems. So again, investments. We basically invested in flow meters, pressure transmitters, and knowledge. Again, I attended as many courses on vacuum systems as I possibly could, learned from as many industry experts as I could, how to place equipment and what to look for, where the savings advantages are in a vacuum system. So To this point, now we are auditing positive displacement compressors, dynamic compressors, and also vacuum systems. Again, added equipment to the audit pool to be able to audit all this equipment. As it progressed, I was doing a compressed air audit and a vacuum audit in a plant, and had the manager of engineering come to me and ask, is there a way we can do an audit on our chiller? We don't know if it's large enough. We're not absolutely sure it's large enough to do what we need to do, or maybe it's too big and we're wasting energy. So at that time, I was in the plant, utilized just some temperature transmitters and kilowatt transmitters to try auditing a chiller system that I wasn't 100% familiar with, but ended up having a really good success with it. So at that point, I began to attend courses and classes and work with manufacturers on cooling equipment, and that included chillers and cooling towers as well. Again, adding more equipment to our system to be able to audit simultaneously a very large plant of between 1 and 10 air compressors, anywhere between 1 and 5 or 10 vacuum pumps, multiple chillers, 3 to 5 chillers at a time, as well as a very large cooling tower system. On the very next audit, we implemented it, and it was an extremely large, extremely cumbersome amount of data to deal with. We continued to have some great successes. In fact, the first one that we did, we saved the company I don't remember the dollar figure, but it was a very large amount of money as a package, as a whole, compressed air vacuum, as well as the cooling system. So at this point, we're doing audits on everything, everything within the larger utilities of a large plant. So we changed from compressed air only to vacuum and cooling. It was kind of an organic change. It wasn't, again, something that I set out to do. It was really in response to customer requests. I'm not really good at saying no when a customer asks me for something. So it was a lot easier to take the path of least resistance, invest in some equipment, and really more than anything, invest in the training and the knowledge that's required to help the customer. And basically what we tried to do, because at the time it didn't appear that it was being done, we tried to apply the principles that we all learned in the compressed air industry through KGI and CAC to try to reduce those numbers, try to use less, try to do more with less. In most cases, the same principles apply to auditing and doing results on a cooling system as they do on a compressed air system, and also to a vacuum system as well. We're teaching our customers, we're training our customers as well, audit prior to purchase decisions, the things that we're accustomed to in the compressed air side. Right size the equipment. Also, try to use higher efficiency equipment and design in our cooling systems. Just a little bit more thought process. It started gaining more momentum. We became extremely busy with our full-blown audits being booked out months in advance, sometimes in some cases 6 to 8 months in advance. So in response to that, we added some personnel. And that's actually very difficult to do. So now you have to find someone that is an expert in some field, whether it be vacuum, compressed air, or cooling, and try to cross-train them with your company's principles, the way that they're applied within the industry, and turn them into an auditor, so to speak. Very long training curve as well. It's probably a 3 to 5 year constant out in the field training curve. It became the standard scope of supply with our audits. Instead of our sales folks going out and talking about compressed air audits only, we asked them just to ask the question. That's all they needed to do, was just ask the question, and we could go out and size and determine a scope of supply on the audit. So it became, for a larger facility audit and even smaller facilities, it became our standard scope of supply. We would ask about compressed air, vacuum, cooling, chilling, and eventually added hot water and boiler systems as well, as a result of bringing an employee on board who was versed in that. We include, basically just like you would on a compressed air audit, vacuum, compressed air and cooling systems, including kilowatts, pressures, temperatures. And we also made sure that we fully understand the operation of the system from the customer's viewpoint, not particularly how it's supposed to work, because everyone in this room probably in their specified field knows how a system is supposed to work. What made us successful was understanding what the customer thought of his system, how the customer thought that the system was supposed to work. Just as Dana talked about, there are cultures, and these cultures are within a plant. And if you're working with tribal knowledge, hand-me-down knowledge, we found that these systems were operating so far out of their design. A good portion of the time they just required an adjustment. But there's a lot of energy savings there. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit in these utilities. We focused heavily on the demand side of these systems during the audits, becoming the experts. It was our task to help the customer reduce energy. It's very easy to turn off air compressors if there's a resulting change. There's a change out in the system. It's easy to turn off air compressors to reduce frequencies on cooling water or cooling system fans. So we tried to focus on the demand side as much as possible. We always supplied a ultrasonic leak and inappropriate use walkthrough and catalog for the customer. And ultimately, as I said, tried to help the customer out with their manufacturing process, because that's really where the savings is. We always supply data-rich audit results, a lot less boilerplate data. Our audit, our standard compressed air audit is really only a few pages long, because we find that as an industry we've turned to utilizing a lot of boilerplate, and I think we lose the customer sometimes with all the boilerplate. So basically we try to present the data in real time on a webcast or a presentation, and just a very brief written report. We look at the customer more as a partner, both in setting up the audit, figuring out what we should measure, figuring out where the inefficiencies are, and mostly in the results interpretation, and coming together as a partnership for providing results and ways to implement the recommendations that we've made. So a lot of the after audit services that we decided to do, aside from equipment sales, we would go in and balance a cooling water system, an entire cooling water system. We found that a good majority of the systems out there weren't properly balanced. If they're not properly balanced, it doesn't matter how oversized or how properly sized they are, they just won't cool. So we learned a lot of techniques for balancing systems. It's generally a very quick solution for cooling system issues. Again, aside from equipment sales, we did compressor and vacuum controls adjustment, compressed air and vacuum system piping recommendations, on-site maintenance and system operational training for the customer, and also assisting the customer with implementing ways to fix a lot of their leaks and inappropriate uses. So there's a lot to be done out there besides equipment sales. We attended now, all of our employees that are focused on this system attend classes on cooling systems. We began actively marketing and selling cooling systems and towers. At first, we began with packages that were purchased from other vendors, and as time went on, we started building our own pump systems and control panels. And from the beginning, when we designed our very first system, our cooling water system, we focused on saving energy, right-sizing systems with our control and pump packages. We became more of a single source. So when supplying compressors, compressed air treatment, it's not a stretch to add vacuum or cooling, both towers and chillers, and we added into the mix hot water systems and boilers as well. We seem to all be in that same industry anyway, and it's not a large stretch to learn this stuff. So we always felt that we needed to offer our differentiation through different products. When we say differentiation, we want to offer something that our competitors aren't offering. And ultimately what that is a whole package. So while my competitors are selling a single compressor, a single air dryer, and maybe a vacuum pump, we're focusing on the whole system. There are some really great synergies to be had with these systems. So now for us, full cooling systems are a tower, pump packages, filtration, automation, and controls. And then we even go so far as engineering and project management. There's a ton of points of interface. This is the coolest part, is there's a domino effect between these systems where a lot of energy efficiency gains can be achieved that as an individual supplier supplying all these different pieces of equipment, it's very difficult to take advantage of. So as an example, if you're supplying water-cooled compressors, air dryers, and vacuum pumps, they're a heat load. They produce heat, right? And ultimately, now we're going to size a tower system based on the above supplied package and also local conditions. So now we can add in a heat recovery system, which could consist of multiple different ways, whether it's air to air, air to water, exchanger, or water to water exchanger, or water to a process exchanger. Ultimately, at that point, now you take BTU content from the tower, and you're reducing the fan and the pump required horsepower. Now we add in a hot water or a boiler system. We take the heat that we've recovered from the cooling tower, and we impart it to the heat load or to the boiler system for water makeup. Ultimately reducing the natural gas usage for the plant. So there are a ton of synergies that if you can look at the whole picture, there's a lot of synergies there that basically supply the whole package, and what the customer nets out is a really, really nice running package because you don't have multiple vendors thinking in different ways. And ultimately, the customer saves a ton of resources. Customer has now one point of contact for all the potential interface issues between all these systems, and it eliminates finger pointing. Overall better package, and the system operates as a single energy efficiency system that's fully utilized. So we started out with one multiple location customer. We've let it filter into our everyday operation, so now it's our standard operating procedure when discussing a compressed air audit or a vacuum audit is to ask about the cooling system and see if we can optimize it. Our sales force is now challenged to have a dialogue about the total system. We don't just sell compressors, we are system experts. It did start with the thought process of diversification. It was definitely challenging at times. Recommend starting with adding personnel instead of doing it all by yourself. That always makes it easier. We came more vertically integrated for better quality control, but more than that, it's for better innovation. We are now generally recognized as a solutions provider. Just as compressed air has become more, because of KGI and CAC, has become more instrumented and measured, we've tried to implement the same systems with cooling systems. Technology is changing and monitoring is much more portable and much more affordable. Thank you for your time.